Hey there, I'm Josh, and today I'm going to be just joshing around customizing a Halo Nerf gun. This is the Halo MA40 Assault Rifle motorized dart blaster made by Nerf. This sweet baby was made in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Retails for about $109.95. It's got a walnut stock, cobalt blue steel, and a hair trigger. Yeah, actually, none of that's true. I get a little confused sometimes. This Nerf gun did actually get released back in 2020, which is when Halo Infinite was originally supposed to release, but we all know how that went. Regardless, my good buddy picked up this baby a couple months ago and asked me if I would do a little customization for it, so I happily obliged. And I gotta admit, up to this one, most of the Halo guns that were made by Nerf haven't really been that impressive. Not nearly as impressive as the ones made by Boomco. But on this assault rifle, they did a really good job with all the detail. As you can see, the first step was to completely disassemble the gun, and to document the process so I don't put it back together incorrectly. The main reason for this disassembly is to add a functioning flashlight to the gun instead of this little cosmetic one. This gun has two triggers, one to activate the electronics and the other to actually fire the darts. We're going to be tying this circuit into the first trigger. In order to find a flashlight that would fit, I scraped through a bunch of old junk drawers and found this one that I got from work a long time ago for like a safety award or something. It's almost the perfect size to fit inside the shell of the fake flashlight. But before I went to all the trouble of custom fitting it, I hooked up some wires to the battery terminals and tried it out. Works pretty good. The next step was to use a rotary carver with a drum sander to hollow out the inside of the flashlight shell. And once I got the flared section all sized correctly, I used a ball burr to remove all the material from the other side of the shell. Things were still just a bit too tight, so I used a step bit to hollow it out a little bit more. And now the size was pretty much perfect. The next step was to select the completely wrong tool to try to trim down the size of the tube. Don't ask me why I tried to use a Sawzall, it really didn't work. So to finish it up, I just took it to the disc sander and got it the rest of the way. Probably should have just done that to begin with. Now, to permanently attach the circuit to the flashlight, first I drilled a hole in the side of the shell, then prepped a bit of wire and inserted it into the hole, and then drove a screw in to secure it. Now, ordinarily I'd like to use solder on any electronic components, but that really wasn't an option here, so I used hot glue instead. For the other side of the circuit, I inserted a wire through the spring on the head of the flashlight, crimped it together, and then secured it once again with some hot glue. It's not the most elegant solution, but it works. Once that was done, I inserted the tube of the flashlight into the shell, and then secured the head. Then it was time to put the flashlight into place in the gun. I prepped some black wire and then soldered it onto the post sticking off of the negative side of the base plate for the battery terminal. I made sure to push the extra wire out of the way so that it wouldn't be pinched when I reassembled the gun. For the positive side of the circuit, I routed the wire all the way back to the trigger mechanisms. This wire was then soldered into place on the post of the open side of the micro switch. Now to test it out. Looks pretty good. The next step was to reassemble the gun for some reason and sand off all the branding. By the way, by the end of this, I got really good at disassembling and reassembling this gun, but more on that in a bit. Anytime I do any of these customizations, I like to sand off any of the branding just because it looks better in the final product. I wouldn't want a realistic gun with a Nerf logo on it or a Halo logo. It just doesn't look cool. The same thing goes for any of the manufacturing details. But for this, I couldn't really just sand it off, so I'm going to be using some modeling clay to cover it up instead. I cut open the wrapper and then pooped it out of the packaging, and cut off a chunk to smash down. I got a piece all flattened out and then used some water, which is like crazy glue for clay, as we've covered in the past, to attach the piece into place. I pushed it into place, cut away the excess, and then very carefully formed it into the shape I was wanting. I repeated the same process with a little smaller chunk of clay and got it pushed into place as well. Once that was all done, I let the clay dry overnight and then sanded it nice and smooth. My goal here was to make it look like it was flush with the gun, so it didn't look like it was a piece of clay covering up some lettering. I used a shop vac to sweep away all the dust, and then it was time for painting. I once again disassembled the gun, and then thoroughly covered every piece with a coat of gray primer. I let the primer dry overnight, and then I applied a coat of soft iron metallic spray paint over most of the gun. For a couple of the pieces, I wanted them to have two different shades of metallic paint on them, so I applied that same soft iron spray paint to those areas. Now while that paint was drying, I applied some satin granite to these parts. Once those other parts were dry, I masked off the appropriate areas and applied a hammered antique pewter spray paint to them. Using all these different colors and finishes of paint really helps to add to the character and the realism of the gun. Now that all the spray painting was done, it was time to start hand painting all the smaller detail areas. The first of which being this yellow stripe on the top front of the gun. I'm using Tester's model paints for all the hand painting and the hand painting. By the way, upon reassembling the gun, I found that 3 of the 5 LEDs in the flashlight no longer functioned. So this required me to disassemble the gun once again, find another flashlight that would work, and install it. So 3 flashlights later, and we were back in business. The whole ordeal with the flashlights was a big pain in the butt and pretty discouraging, but luckily we got it all sorted out. Anyway, just adding some detail here on the grip on the bottom front of the gun. Next, I used a flat steel colored paint to add some detail to various parts of the gun, like the flashlight, the barrel, some slides and switches, and the trigger. You may not have noticed, but there are several spots on the gun where the spray paint actually crackled in the finish, and I'm not sure why. I think it has to do with the type of plastics that's being used with that particular type of paint. Regardless, it is frustrating, and I tried to clean off a good bit of it, but aside from like sandblasting the gun, there's no way to get it all. So I tried to just incorporate it into the look of the gun to give it more character and depth. This thing looks battle-worn and beat up. The next color I switched to was a metallic black, which when dry kind of looks like a regular gunmetal like cobalt blue look. Again, I tried to switch up the colors and finishes of these paints to add extra detail and texture and layering to this gun to give it a more realistic look. I applied this color over a bunch of different spots on the gun. And for all of the quote-unquote hardware that holds the gun together, I used a silver Sharpie to make the bolt heads pop. Next, it was time for my favorite part of any of these customizations, weathering. For this, I mainly just used regular black shoe polish thinned out with a bit of water. If this happens to be the first time you're seeing this done, all it consists of is applying shoe polish all over the gun and then wiping away the excess with a paper towel, and that's it. You just have to work it down into all the crevices and nooks and crannies and whatnot, and then just wipe away the extra. It's crazy how simple this process is, but it really gives a lot of life to whatever it is you're working on. And once that's done, it's time to move on to dry brushing. This consists of getting some metallic silver paint on your brush, wiping away most of the excess on a paper towel, and then just casually brushing on to different areas on the gun. The idea being that you're making the metal on the gun look like it's all scraped and scratched up. You have to be careful with this though, because it's easy to get carried away and then it just kind of looks goofy after a while. So sometimes it's better to take the less is more approach. After that, this gun customization is pretty much done. So let's take a look at it all finished up. I have to say, I'm pretty thrilled with how this gun turned out. I love how all the different shades and finishes of paint tie together. I think adding a functioning flashlight was a fantastic idea. I love how realistic this gun looks. It's like it was pulled right out of the game, and that's awesome. I certainly wasn't happy with how the paint crackled, but overall, I'm definitely very satisfied with it.
I need a weapon. Let's finish this fight.
Man, I can't tell you how thrilled I am with how this gun turned out. I was a little bummed about the crackling in the paint, but overall I think it adds to the character of the gun. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. This project was a lot of fun to work on, and it feels great making another video. I'm trying to get back into the swing of things, so hopefully I'll have some more videos coming soon. I hope you enjoyed this video and maybe you found it helpful in some way. If you're new here, thanks for stopping by, and check out some of my other stuff that's going to pop up in a moment. And if you're back for more, thanks for sticking with me. I appreciate it. Thanks for watching, take care, and I'll see you next time.
Yes, sir.
Requisition confirmed. On the way with your hardware.